If you've just had one of those days when your boss blows up over nothing, the printer dies in your arms, and someone nukes fish in the office microwave, and you turn to YouTube to decompress and find some tiny lifeline that might stop you from submitting that resignation letter you typed in a meltdown, this video is for you. In this two-part series, we're going to take you through the worst jobs you could have ended up with in the 20th century, decade by decade. That's pretty much it for the intro. I don't know what else to say. Enjoy, I guess? 1900s. Meatpacking workers. In the 1900s, America was getting richer by the day. The population is growing and it needs to be fed. And Chicago, well, Chicago smells like money. And by money, I mean meat. Tons of it. Beef, pork, sausages, all by the mile. It's basically the nation's butcher shop at this point. Too bad the workers don't see any of that. What they did see was pretty much hell. The slaughterhouses smelled like blood and rot. The floors never dried, they were always slick with offal. Knives flashed, hooks swung, machines clattered, animals shrieked. The noise never stopped, and neither did the line. Not even when someone collapsed. Workers spent 12 hours a day here. They had no brakes or protective gear. So cuts, burns, crushed bones, and amputated limbs were just an everyday thing. And when it happened, you didn't get patched up, you just didn't get paid. You didn't get anything. You were simply thrown out the same way scraps of bone and waste were. Most of these men were new arrivals from Europe. They were broke, desperate, and didn't speak much English, which made it easy for the companies to grind them down for pennies. These brutal working conditions were exposed by Upton Sinclair in his 1906 book, The Jungle. When the public read it, they were outraged that their sausages might contain rat feces, and occasionally human fingers. As for the previous owners of those fingers, yeah, they didn't care at all. 1910s, coal miners. I know, calling coal mining the worst job in the 1910s might sound a bit off when people were literally dying in the trenches. But when it comes to danger levels, it wasn't exactly minor. Okay, back to the point. In the 1910s, coal was everywhere. It powered factories, railroads, and pretty much the entire industrial world. People loved coal. They loved coal. Well, except for the coal miner who actually had to dig it out. Men and boys spent their days hundreds of feet underground in tunnels so tight you sometimes had to crawl just to get through. Methane gas built up until the whole place went up like a bomb. 10, 12 hours in the dark, shoveling, hauling, hacking, roofs caved in without warning. If you were lucky not to die in a collapse or an explosion, you still had coal dust slowly rotting your lungs from the inside out, and there was no cure. And if all that wasn't bad enough, coal miners were barely paid a dime. That is, if you even got paid in money. Many miners were trapped in company towns, where wages came in scrip. That's basically fake money that only worked at the company store, and of course, the store charged whatever it wanted. By the end of the week, miners often owed the company more money than they had earned. So you kept working, not to get ahead, but to keep your family from starving. And when disasters struck, they were catastrophic. In 1913, an explosion in the Shanganid colliery in Wales killed 439 miners in a single day. The following year, Canada's Hillcrest mine blew up, killing 189 people. So yeah, the coal mining industry filled a few pockets and plenty of graves. 1920s, Radium girls. The Roaring 20s in the US were an era of luxury, decadence, and showing off. And what better way to show off as a gentleman than with a fancy wristwatch? But as the saying goes, behind every great man with a luminous dial watch is a woman dying of radiation poisoning. Factories hired women by the thousands to paint those watch faces with radium. They were told the paint was harmless. They were even encouraged to keep their brushes sharp by licking them, over and over again, night after night. And they put radium straight into their mouths. Radium is not good to put inside of you. If only their bosses knew how dangerous it was. Oh wait, they did know. I mean, of course they knew. They just didn't particularly care. Soon teeth started falling out, mouths filled with ulcers, jaws crumbled into dust. A condition so grotesque it became known as radium jaw. Women broke bones from the inside, developed anemia, cancers, and sterility. By the mid-1920s, dozens were dead and hundreds were sick. And how did the companies respond? Like true gentlemen, of course. They paid off doctors, spread rumors that the women weren't sick from radium at all, but from syphilis. I guess when in doubt, blame the victim and smear her reputation, but luckily, these women fought back. In 1927, a group of dial painters from New Jersey sued the United States Radium Corporation. It became one of the first big worker safety cases in America. The company dragged it out as long as possible, hoping the women would simply die before the verdict, and many of them did. But in the end, the survivors won settlements, and more importantly, set precedents for workplace protections and occupational disease claims. 1930s. Hawks Nest tunnel workers. The Great Depression of the 1930s had crushed economies across the globe. By 1933, 1 in 4 Americans was out of work. Whole families drifted from town to town chasing rumors of jobs that didn't exist. So when Union Carbide promised work in the hills of West Virginia, you bet there were takers. They wanted people to dig a grand tunnel under the Gauley Mountain to control the New River, and it sounded like a win. Around 3,000 men signed up, most of them poor black migrants from the South. They were hungry, desperate, and willing to do anything if it meant a paycheck. They swung picks and drills 10, 12, sometimes 15 hours a day, clawing through the mountain sandstone. But this wasn't just any rock. Gauley Mountain was rich in silica, and when silica turns to dust, it gets into your lungs like shards of glass. After just a few hours, breathing felt like swallowing knives. After a few months, men couldn't climb the stairs without gasping, and then they started coughing up blood. Within 1 year, many were dead. How many? Well, the official number says 476, but locals swore it was closer to 700. Some historians even say over 1,000. That's basically a body every few feet of tunnel, and most of them were buried in unmarked graves. The company knew it was dangerous. Management wore masks when they came down for inspections, while the workers were given nothing. But hey, the tunnel got finished in record time. Union Carbide made their money and simply walked away. Funny how this keeps happening, huh? 1940s. Uranium miners. The 1940s, of course, were defined by World War II. If you were a soldier, a prisoner of war, or just unlucky enough to live in the wrong city when the bombs fell, you saw pretty much the worst humanity could do. But there was another job in this decade that could kill you just as surely. Underground again. If you spent the first half of the century with a shovel in your hand, your chances of living a happy life weren't that great. See, nuclear fission was just discovered, and uranium was suddenly the most valuable rock on Earth. Whoever had the most of it could end the war and become the definitive superpower. The US, Britain, and Canada dug up what they could in places like Colorado Plateau and Port Radium. But the real jackpot was thousands of miles away in the Belgian Congo. While American ore barely had a trace of uranium, Shinkolobwe's rock was up to 65% pure. That ore fueled the Manhattan Project. The bombs that devastated Hiroshima and Nagasaki started in this pit, and the people who pulled it out were mostly Congolese laborers under Belgian colonial rule. And they weren't told what they were handling. They weren't given masks, gloves, or even basic medical care. A single shift underground could expose them to more radiation than scientists in the US were even allowed in an entire year. Men collapsed in the pits, sick with cancers no one had a name for yet. Outside the pit, families drank water poisoned by mine runoff. Women miscarried at alarming rates, babies were born with deformities. The secrecy of the Manhattan Project came first. Officially, the glory went to the scientists who split the atom. Unofficially, the real price was paid by the miners whose names we'll never know. And with that note, we're going to end today's video. Please let us know if you liked it in the comments down below, and if you want to see a part 2 where we'll cover the worst jobs in the rest of the 20th century. Hope you all have a good day, and we'll see you next time.